Okay, we're moving on now to lesson 5, fraction and decimal equivalencies, and that's on page 250 of our Kaplan book. Fractions and decimals are two ways to show part of a whole. You can change fractions to decimals by dividing. Change 3/8 to a decimal. The fraction 3/8 means 3 divided by 8. Use a calculator to divide. So if we have here 3 divided by 8, they tell us what it equals, but if we were going to put it on our calculator, okay, we turn it on, we clear 3 divided by 8. Again, we took that fraction, 3/8, and divided it to get a decimal. 0.375 is our answer as a decimal. You can also change a decimal to a fraction. So if you were asked to change 0.35 to a fraction, it says write the decimal number over the place value name of the last decimal digit on the right. So the last digit, 5. Remember, the last digit to the right is a 5 here. The last digit, 5, is in the hundredths column. If we remember our place values when we talked about place values of decimals. So we had tenths, hundredths. Remember, we added the THS at the end. So now it says reduce to lowest terms. Okay, so we have, what we did was when we took this decimal and turned it into a fraction, we took the 35, okay, whatever was after the decimal, which is 35, that became our numerator. And we put that numerator over 100. The reason we did that is because the last digit in this decimal is in the hundredths column. Hundredths place value. Okay? Now, as we can see, 35 over 100 can be reduced. We can make it smaller, basically. 35 divided by 5 is 7. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. So the number, the highest number we can divide by for 35 and 100 is 5. That gave us 7 over 20, and this fraction now cannot be reduced any further. Okay, so that would be our final answer. Going from 0.35 to a fraction, we get 7 over 20 once it's reduced. Okay? You will find it useful to memorize the most common fraction and decimal equivalents. These equivalents will also help you solve percent problems. Remember, by equivalents, we mean they are equal. They mean the same thing. Just like we showed before, 3/8 is equal to this decimal, 0.375. Again, here was another example. 0.35, this decimal, is equivalent to this fraction, and if it's reduced, it's this fraction. They're equivalent, they're equal, but one is in fraction form, the other one is in decimal form. Now they have these 3 tables here, 2 columns in each table. One column is decimal, and the other column next to it, you see the fraction that's equivalent to that decimal. For example, 0.1 is equivalent to the fraction 1 over 10. Another example, 0.25 is equal to 1/4. So they're telling us here in this little paragraph that we read above them that it might be helpful to memorize these basic or most common fraction and decimal equivalents, just to make it easier to solve problems in math that deal with percentages, for example. Okay. The decimal equivalents for 1/3 and 2/3 are marked with a bar. The bar shows that the decimal repeats indefinitely. It keeps going, that means. Okay, and I'll show you an example. If I was to show you right here, 0.333 has a bar over it. That's equivalent to the fraction 1/3. So on my calculator, I'm going to divide 1 by 3. 1 divided by 3. Here we go, 1 divided by 3. And you see here, the 3, it's 0.3, but the 3 is being repeated. It keeps going. So they stop in the thousandths place, and they just put a bar on top of that 3 to show you that the 3 actually continues forever, basically. You can use fraction and decimal equivalents to save time when solving math problems. Example 3. Each dose of cough medicine contains 0.25 ounce of medication. How many ounces of medication are in 48 doses? To solve the problem, you need to multiply 48 by 0.25. A time-consuming calculation. Time-consuming means it takes too much time. However, since 0.25 equals 1 over 4, you can find 1 over 4 of 48 to solve the problem. So they're telling us if this is going to be too time-consuming to divide by a decimal, use the fraction form. So we would put 48 times 1 over 4. Okay, and remember, we're going to multiply straight across. We can pretend this 48 here has a 1 as a denominator. So 48 times 1 is 48. 1 times 4 is 4. 48 divided by 4 equals 12. Okay? Another way to think of this problem is to say, what is a quarter of 48? Okay? What is a quarter of 48? And the question says, how many ounces of medication are in 48 doses? When we think of the word of, think multiplication. And there will be more examples as we go along. Okay? Remember to review these key ideas here on the side of the page. They're very helpful when trying to remember the main parts of the lesson. The most important parts. Okay? On page 251, it says at the top, knowing fraction decimal equivalents can also help you interpret remainders when using a calculator. So for example, Ray inspects machine assemblies. He must inspect 12 assemblies during his 40-hour work week. On average, how many hours can he spend on each inspection? So, again, we have on our calculator, we're going to divide 40, right? His total, hours that he works, number of hours that he works during the week, 40 by the number of machines or assemblies that he has to inspect. So 40 divided by 12, enter on our calculator. We can do it here. 40 divided by 12 is 3.333. Again, repeating. So we can stop. Remember, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. We'll stop at the thousandths place value, and we can put we can put a bar on top of that 3. And we know 0.33 repeating, if I go back to this table, is equivalent to 1/3. Okay? So here we have, since you know that 0.333 equals 1/3, the answer is 3 1/3 hours. Again, this 3 and this mixed number came from the whole number before the decimal. Okay? And obviously the 1/3 came from the 0.333 repeating. Okay? Practice 5 is more practice with this lesson. It says solve, when possible, use fraction and decimal equivalents to make the work easier. You may use a calculator on questions 5 and 6. So again, just 5 and 6 is where they were asking us, they're telling us to use a calculator. I'm assuming 1 through 4 we should be able to solve without a calculator. So try that and see if you're able to do it. Let's look at number 1. During a 25% off sale, store clerks find the amount of the discounts by multiplying the regular price by 0.25. What is the discount on an item with a regular price of $80? Now we know this is 25%. 0.25 as a fraction, this is part of those fractions that we were told are helpful to memorize. So 0.25 as a decimal is equivalent to 1/4 as a fraction. So this is basically asking, what is 1/4 of 80? Or what is 1/4 of 80? There's that multiplication, right? So if we think of 80 divided by 4, we know the answer is 20. Okay, this is the quickest way to solve it. Okay, so go ahead and complete the page, just so you have 1 through 6 on this page, and then please take a picture of the completed page and send it to me on Remind so I can give you credit for attendance. All right, on the next page, we have decimals and fractions on the number line. On the GED mathematical reasoning test, which is again the title of the math GED test, you may need to recognize or locate fractions, mixed numbers, or decimals on a number line. A number line represents numbers in order from least to greatest. As you move to the left along a number line, the numbers decrease in value. So again, when we go to the left on a number line, the numbers decrease. And as we move to the right, the numbers increase in value. The arrows on the ends indicate that the numbers continue forever in both directions. This is important. These arrows indicate that the numbers continue forever. This is just a part of a number line. Okay, but there are numbers that are lower, there are numbers that are greater. Okay? If you imagine zooming in on a portion of that number line, it might look like this. So again, just think of this like one small piece of a really big number line that continues forever in both directions. Thus is another word for therefore, a number line can include decimals and whole numbers. For example, the point represents 0.75, which is greater than 0.5 and less than 1. Again, here we have 0.75. It is greater than to the right of 0.5, but it is less than 1. It is to the left of 1, so it's less than 1. A number line can also represent fractions and mixed fractions in order from least to greatest. So here we have a number line, and we have fractions and whole numbers on it. We can see this number line starts with 0, and then it goes up by a quarter, 1/4. 1/4 then becomes 1/2. Or doesn't become, it increases to 1/2. Then 3/4. Then we see 1. So we can tell between 0 and 1, this number line increases by a quarter, 0.25, or 1/4. Okay? Use this question to practice working with number lines. John works 5 shifts per week. His boss asks him to spend exactly half of his time this week working on a specific project. How many work shifts will John give to that project? Circle the answer on the number line below. So again, he works 5 shifts per week. His boss asks him to spend exactly half of this time working on a specific project. Half of the 5 shifts. How many work shifts will John devote to that project? So we have to ask ourselves, what is half of 5? Half of 5, right, is 2.5. So we would circle, it says circle the answer on the number line. We would circle 2.5. If you circle 2.5, you are correct. Again, multiply 5 times 1/2 to determine that John will spend 2.5 shifts on this project. Okay? Again, there are more key ideas on this page and another on the GED test tip here that you should look over. Okay? On the next page, page 253, there's practice for this lesson. There's part A, which says choose the one best answer to each question. What is the value of the point on the number line below? So we have to find out how much is this number line increasing by each time, and that'll help you determine what's missing. Okay, whether you have to add that amount or subtract that amount. All right? So that's 1 through 8 on this page. Please complete these 2 lessons. So you have page 251 and 253. Send me a picture on Remind when they're done, and I will give you credit towards your attendance. And like always, you can send me questions as well on anything you may be stuck on or having trouble with. And I'll be glad to help. Thank you. Bye.